And everyone, welcome on this chilly and chilly and snowy morning. Glad that you're able to attend our webinar. I think we have some great information to talk to you about, and as well as demonstrate. And I'll be one of the voices that's kind of helping Tim as we go through, as we're both co-presenting on this topic. Tim?
Do we want to start with a poll to see?
Sure.
Let's start with a poll.
And for those that had audio choppiness, it looks like, certainly raise your hand if you have it any longer, but it looks like things have squared away here.
So our first poll question is, who's using Teams currently, just to get a gauge of where we're at. I just want to say I got into this meeting probably a half an hour early, and I was all ready to go. And as soon as the presentation started, my GoToMeeting application crashed. And so I quickly rejoined the meeting. Yeah, but when I rejoined, there was no audio.
Well, it would be great to see the deck. I'll be the voiceover.
Yeah. So then I did a Teams call, because that's our voice solution. So I'm actually in a Teams call calling in to a GoToMeeting to do the presentation. So
that's great. Yeah, it's another use case. There's our Teams voice working to solve things, and maybe in the future we'll, rid ourselves of GoToMeeting as one of our potential use cases. But we have to test this for some of the load we're going to get. So great. Hopefully, everyone's got an opportunity to answer. We certainly are going to anonymously share the results, and there you go. We've got a majority of our users are at an organizational level usage, which is great. Still only a third of the audience. Others are, as we kind of thought, piloting things, within their IT department. The Teams app is often downloaded with, your Office. The Teams services are active on the back. People might be considering, how am I going to get off Skype or replace Skype? So again, the answers are probably in line with where I thought things would be, and happy to have all of you, independent of how you're leveraging Teams today.
All right. So I know the question was already asked, when is Skype going away? So end of support, July 31st, 2021, which is just a little over a year. So we kind of thought we'd frame this presentation a little bit around, what Skype had done for people, what Teams is going to replace, just to kind of give you a framework of how Skype and Teams kind of work together.
To add some color commentary to that too, Tim,
Sure.
Remember that on the back end, a lot of people that are spinning up new Office 365s today don't even have access to Skype services. So Microsoft has has to put a line in the sand for those that have Skype, and have a formalized date when things need to be rolled off. But they're, behind the scenes, making people move much sooner than that, depending on your situations. In fact, the Skype client as a whole is not getting any upgrades. Well, geez, I really would like to get some upgrades to this to do this feature or that. Well, you can't, so it's the Teams that's getting all of the development effort, and the back end is really starting to shut things down already too.
All right. So these are the big feature areas that Teams has to offer. And what I'm going to do is kind of break each one of these down, give a few examples of maybe where Skype, there's some overlap here, and then talk about some high-level stuff. We're going to do a demo, and we'll get into more of the specifics with the demo. So let's start with chat. So people that are familiar with Skype, they're very familiar. That was its main feature, was chatting. One of the big negatives of chat is that when you close that chat window, that information was gone. Teams is persistent. So my first chat with Bruce was in September, and I can go back to that now and scroll back through my chats and see that conversation we had back in September. Another. Oh,
hey, Tim. Yeah, we might want to do the screen share again. I'm seeing it fine. you seeing anyone else, Samantha, having difficulty on screen share or no? Okay, looks like it's fine. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Continuing thing. Sorry about that.
Sure.
Just want to make sure
And
we get
another,
everyone moving in the same direction.
that's right. And another advantage with the Teams is team messaging. So you can have chat around a specific department or a group, which is handled much differently, and that persistence is also a huge advantage.
I think the other thing I'd add, Tim, and certainly they're going to see this in the demonstration, but there's a lot of, it's a really modern chat features. I mean, there's, little things called read receipts, which get annoying in email, right? But they're really well done in Teams and, really full featured. So like if you're dropping a web page into a Skype URL, it's just a web URL and it's kind of boring. You drop it into a Teams and, they give you a little preview of what the website's going to look like. And it's just a lot more rich. There's, as you can see kind of on the bottom right, and Tim will show some of those items, I think, although I don't think we're going to chat. There's, GIFs and emoticons and other things that can provide animation. And the chat can also, take on a little bit of a life of its own, dropping files and so forth in there really become part of the stream. So a really good modern experience from a chat perspective.
And while we're on the topic of chat, one question that was asked: Are chats and Teams archived?
It's persistent, so it's always there. So I guess I don't know that you would need to archive it because it's always going to be there.
There are capabilities. Yeah, archiving sometimes is a bit of a loaded word. So if you want to refine the question in the audience, you certainly can. E-discovery is fully available. And so if you've got a desire to keep messages within Teams, certainly the retention rules and so forth are part of that, are one of the extension capabilities. We were going to chat about that in the governance portion of this. Tim, go ahead.
Sure. I'm kind of following that feature list. Collaboration was next, but that is really not something you can show on a slide. We'll talk about that in the demo. So next item on that list was meetings. And here's just a high level of different ways to set up a meeting. Everybody knows Outlook. People used to do it in Skype and now in Teams. The immediacy was there in Skype and Teams, but the persistence wasn't. So having chats and meetings tied to some kind of a structure is where Teams really shines. And then keeping those groups, and then the last one there, the one to few discussions. If you're in a meeting and you've done a lot of work, you can easily add another person to that conversation, and they can review all the chats that have happened before and meetings that have taken place. And it's just something that's new to this environment that you weren't able to do in the past. So it's easy to add someone to that team and get them caught up to speed.
For the 20% of our audience that doesn't have Teams or Skype kind of working here, chats can really helpful. Like even in background situations like this, if Samantha, as an example, wanted to kind of have a background chat with me here while we're having this discussion, we could, right? Or during conference calls, or the ability to kind of get a quick answer. It really does move the pace of business a little bit faster with the immediacy of answers, and then Teams also gives you some persistence too. So kind of enough on that portion. We'll keep moving on with other collaboration elements here.
So there's a whole dedicated set of hardware, set of Teams rooms. It just really enhances that meeting. The dual screens, you can present on one and see who's participating on the other. A neat feature that Teams has is this ability to blur the background. They're actually adding a feature that will let you substitute the background. So this is a screenshot I took from a meeting I was participating in. My timing probably wasn't the best because I caught them looking a little weird, but both of these presenters had their backgrounds blurred. And it doesn't have to be a big setup in a big room. You can do something very small scale in a small room. So you can join a meeting just from your laptop with a webcam. here's a camera on a TV, and it just gives you that richer experience.
Every vendor worth their salt is providing hardware and appliances for this, so you're not locked in from a vendor perspective. The Polycoms, the Plantronics, the Room Systems of the world are all subscribing and having Teams integration as a portion of theirs. There's also something called Teams Integration Services, which is designed to work with maybe older services that might be in place, called Teams Interop. But we can cover those in future deep dives that we'll be doing in the voice and conferencing.
So calling, I actually mentioned that earlier because I'm actually in a Teams call calling into this webinar. So all the same features you had in Skype or any other system. I guess the neat thing here is that, this is called the app bar, and it brings all of those experiences into one location. So you can go from chat to a call meeting, and it's just, one click away. You don't have to find the right app to do what you need to do.
And for those that are moving off a traditional phone system, I think one of the things, or one of the joys we found, and this goes back a long ways, even to the Skype days, is that you're really not calling numbers any longer. You're calling people, right? Between your contacts, and it's probably true of your mobile phone too, right? Call Joe, right? And all of a sudden it calls Joe. That same capability is now brought to work, right? So Skype had, and now Teams continues, the idea of calling people or interacting with people. And you don't need to have dial tone to do these things, right? So voice plans are something that are necessary when you need to dial digits and or dial out beyond your organization. But one Teams user calling another Teams user can indeed just use the networking capability. So we'll dive, again, deeper on a lot of these topics in future webinars, but I think that's a great overview.
And another area where Teams really shines is the mobile experience. So it's available across every platform: desktop, laptop, tablet, phone. The web client offers all the same features that all the other applications do. And it brings that whole experience across generations. Traditionally people use a desktop, they move to a laptop. Now, these new kids, they do everything on their phone. And it's really that hub to bring all that information together in one application.
And that goes a long way towards the adoption, right? If someone's used to using the full Teams client, when they move to a browser on a device, let's say that doesn't have the full Teams client on it and just has a browser, the look and feel is the exact same. You really hardly even know that you're not within a full application. And then the mobile experience is logical, right? It's not over buttoned. It's not over featured. Things are pretty logical the way they lay out. You get the swipe capabilities and things of that nature. The meeting experience is unbelievable. Things like the ability to, if you're presenting, if someone's presenting a screen, and I've got a relatively small phone, if someone's presenting a screen, I'm actually able to, do the finger blow up, right, and actually see what's happening on the screen to, emphasize and focus in on those areas of the screen. So just some really nice logical experiences there.
So, high-level overview of Teams. It's a hub for teamwork. It lets you communicate, chat, through meetings and calls, really integrated with all the 365 apps. So in the demo, I'll show you, we worked collaboratively on a PowerPoint in a tabs in a Teams channel. So it's a great way to bring information together. And it's just blowing up in terms of its third-party integration. And so as an organization, we've broken this down into 4 areas, and that's really what we want to focus on our efforts to helping our customers get the most out of this. So today we're going to really focus on envisioning and readiness, a little bit on governance, but this is kind of how we envision helping organizations implement Teams.
these are some of the activities, we can do to kind of help our customers support this, and we'll walk you through. But Envisioning and Readiness will be our starting point. We're anticipating having a webinar each month with deeper dives on areas of governance, implementation, use cases, and so forth. And you'll hear more about that at the end here.
So just wanted to throw out a few statistics on teams and teamwork and those kinds of things. And on this slide, I think I would call out 56% of meetings have at least one remote attendee. So just things to think about as we progress through the rest of this presentation. Just going to jump right into the next one. I've seen this slide multiple times from Microsoft, and every time I see it, they update it. And specifically, it's that last stat there, 20 million daily active users using Teams. So as we progress through this, before I get into the demo, we've got some big framing questions that, just kind of think about in your organization, how you do these things now, and how maybe this application could help you with that. So, all right, the first one is, how do you work across generations? And I looked at a whole bunch of different slides, and this one kind of really summarized things. Used to be face-to-face. That's how people communicated. And it's interesting to see the progression, how it's gone to telephone and email and text messaging, and kind of back to face-to-face with FaceTime. So here's one for Bruce. How do teams collaborate on files?
Files are interesting, right? They're probably the biggest picture with regards to files, and oftentimes, I think people are collaborating around files using email and file servers, right? Nothing wrong with that, with the exception of, what's the final version of files that I have? Is this the latest version that I have? Who has that file? Oh, let me go look in my file folder, or let me go look in my email for that. It's really kind of a poor way to find stuff. There's no enterprise search, and the versions are off. And then furthermore, sharing is easy in email, but oftentimes you don't want some of that sharing to occur. Then along comes, cloud sharing, file sharing services, right? Pick your brand today, the Box, the Dropbox, the OneDrive, and those are great for sharing and storing files, relatively inexpensive. Though, adoption is still there. And then from a governance perspective, you still want to have some insights as to what's being shared with whom, what's your authentication mechanism. Oftentimes people are going around IT, or what's called shadow IT, to start up these services to get the work done that they need. So having an organizational choice there. Then things like intranets come along, whether they be SharePoint or otherwise, and those are wonderful. They solve a lot of problems, a lot of access, a lot of granularity about who can see it, a lot of governance can be applied. From an adoption perspective, there's still some work to be done in that space. Not everyone has an intranet or has gone to SharePoint, and oftentimes we're seeing that for like final work products, or for kind of structured file organizations. And certainly we hope that things like USB drives are not your file sharing mechanism, but all of these are methods by which people are sharing files. And I think one of the things you're going to find about Teams is that it combines the great features, if you will, of things like file sharing that maybe that cloud services bring along, and combines that with unstructured file leveraging too. So a lot of things that are out there today. I don't think we're polling on that one, but maybe on the next one.
Next one, yep. So how do your organizations handle their meetings and calling? So we did a quick search and came up with 9 different tools that people are using. Poll number 2, what are you using?
So you're seeing the results on screen, and it's good to see that there's some Teams usage for conferencing already out there.
So kind of where this was all leading is, the work silos. So if you're doing things ad hoc, or using different applications, you're getting yourself into siloed information where it's not being shared in the most efficient way. Any other comments you want to add there, Bruce, or we'll just jump on to the next?
No, yeah, I mean, our goal is obviously to create some bridges between those silos, and that's Team's goal, right? So visually, we could throw some bridges in there, but yeah, no.
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't seen Teams, there's some real Teams-specific lingo. So in the Teams application, what does Teams mean? That's really a site, and a Teams site would have something called channels. So you can have channels under a site, and then within those channels, you can have what's referred to as tabs.
So Tim, give me an example of a team. Like a team might be what, marketing, like a department level?
Might be a department.
Okay, and then give me another example of a team.
So, well, under your marketing channel or site, you may have a channel for your new website. So that would be a Teams site with a sub-channel, or sales sheets would be another channel in your marketing site.
Right. Okay. So it requires a little organization up front to determine, what kind of teams you're going to want, and this will be part of the governance conversation we'll have here shortly.
So now for the fun part, we'll see how this works since I crashed right before this started. So I'm going to try to demo some of these features, just kind of walk you through the application and show you some of the things that are in there. So chat, voice, calendar, and then ultimately collaboration, because that's really what this is all building toward. And specifically, I'm going to walk you through the site that we used to create this presentation. So let's try.
And while he's going to that, the whole goal of, what we're going to later talk about is envisioning and readiness. The goal is to figure out what your use case is, right? And we've shown you a number of instances. I think there's absolutely a use case around voice. Yes, we want this to be our phone system. That doesn't necessarily mean that's how you want to leverage it, right? You can use this for conferencing, and this can be your conferencing provider, and go replace the GoToMeetings and the WebExes of the world. And very shortly, that might be a use case for us. Tim's going to show you some other use cases that are maybe more around collaboration areas or departmental level use. So, Tim.
So starting out, this is my activities application on the application bar. It just kind of gives you recent things that have happened. So I had a voicemail, I had a chat with Bruce, right? I missed a call. And this window up here is actually the call that I'm in right now. So I was interested to see how that was going to present itself.
Thank goodness it's small. Yeah.
Yeah. So under chats, you have your recent chats, you have your contacts. We were working together on this presentation. And so Bruce had referred to this read receipt over here. So it's just a little icon, and you can hover over it and see that everyone was able to read that, which is nice to know, because chat sometimes leaves you hanging and you don't know if that's been received or not. So chat's very straightforward. Right up at the top, you can do a new chat. It'll pull up a contact list, and you can just type in the person. One of the nice things from this chat window, though, is you can jump right to a video call, a phone call, share your screen. You can add people to that chat. So this, right, it's telling me there's already 4 people in this chat, but you can add somebody else to it. Great way to get people caught up. We'll jump over Teams. We'll go over to my calendar here. Exact same calendar I have in Outlook, but all the ones that say Teams meetings are the ones that you can join right through the application. Again, you can do an ad hoc meeting by clicking Meet Now. You can schedule a meeting here. There's some neat scheduling features that let you schedule resources that will automatically select openings in calendar windows. Calling. So here's the conference ID number that I was frantically typing in, trying to get joined to the conference. All my contacts are here. My call history is all right here. I don't have to jump out, don't have to do anything else. I actually got a voicemail as we were in this call, so I'll have to check that when we're done. And then I added a planner app here. We started to play around with this. So tasks that I've assigned to myself, things that I've gotten completed. Wish I could get rid of that. Put it
Yeah,
over.
and well, it's the in Skype they called it the call bar, if you will, and so they carried over some of that functionality and added a little bit there in terms of dial pad and but yeah, for the purposes you weren't intending to use the audio through Teams, but you had to, and I'm glad that Teams was there for you. And so, with this planner, and let me just tell you a use case that we found. So Planner, I don't even know the fact that I'm in Planner, but as a marketing department, we've got a number of things that we need to look at quite often. There's feedback, and there's several people that need to provide that feedback. From from that perspective, it's quite handy to have something that shows you who has provided feedback and keep all the feedback and the original document all in one location. So Teams has been extremely valuable in that regard, and under the hood, it happens to be using Planner, which is built into your Office 365 plans too.
So here's our customer demo Teams site, and under there we have a Teams webinar channel. Every channel by default gets a tab for posts. So all the information that has been posted to this channel since we started working on this presentation is right here. So another neat thing that I like about channels is that they have a unique email address. So if you have an email you think it's important to share for that topic, you can just send the email, and that's what this was right here. I forwarded an email to the team site, and it shows right up in that conversation stream. As I added tabs and we had meetings, all that information shows up here. Bruce and I were playing around with it. We recorded part of our meeting. And now if you missed the meeting, you could come back and watch that recording right from here and find out what you missed. So another standard tab for every site is files. So again, here's the email messages. They go right into that folder. We were looking at some scenarios, so I put a folder in there, put a bunch of different scenarios in there, and just information we collected as we were working toward this final document. And we use organizationally OneNote a lot, so I added a OneNote tab at the top, and so we have a shared OneNote document where we're keeping our notes. We started out with an agenda. We threw in some pictures that we're thinking about using for the presentation. Thing I really like here is that I can open this OneNote notebook in the standalone OneNote application. So I can switch between my workbook and this shared workbook. Sometimes there's just features that are easier to use when you're using the standalone application, but everything just shows up here. So we added some stats and links, and so all of our information for this is right here. There's the planner, which we talked about. So we set some tasks, collecting material, our first review. When you have outstanding tasks like this, you keep getting emails reminding you you've got a task that hasn't been completed yet. And then we were going to try to demo like a third-party integration. And this leads into governance, which is coming up. I don't have the ability to add a third-party app. So trying to keep a handle on things. You don't want people just randomly adding third-party apps to your team site. So I wasn't able to do that.
Yeah, that's one of about 50 plus, dials that you may want to turn, right? Who should be authorized to turn on third-party apps, right? And so I think we've got a slide coming up on that pretty shortly, but it's there's a number of things that you might want to consider, and that's part of our goal is to help you walk through that consideration process. The only thing I'd emphasize back on what Tim was showed there was so our use case there was around an activity, right? In this case, producing this webinar. Yours might be around something else, a project, or it could be around a virtual team that got formed to execute some item. Those are great opportunities to kind of give the virtual team a capability to put everything in one spot. And the meeting notes, I mean, everyone's so it's when you have 10 people that are taking their own individual meeting notes, it really does a disservice to the team. If you're taking team meeting notes and storing it in the team's location, it's a much much more efficient way to, I think, operate, so that you have one version of the truth, if you will, coming out of the meeting.
And so here's the PowerPoint presentation as a tab in our channel for our team site. So you can actually edit this right here in this window. You can open it up in the application. And so everybody's on the same page. We're all seeing the same information.
Yeah, we had 4 or 5 people that produced slides for this webinar. So obviously, from a consistency perspective, it was helpful to have someone in charge of that. But otherwise, the content really was a co-collaboration capability here. All right.
We're going to jump back now to where I was. Here we are. So another use case for us is we are creating sites for some of our customers. So we're a managed service provider. We do a lot of project work for our clients. In some instances, we are the full IT. So we're creating these sites. We've got some common information we're going to share, and it'll just be a one-stop shop for information. And our internal teams will have access to it, and then our clients will have access as well. And then one more thing I just wanted to show from the calendar, when a meeting's about to start, you get this little join button here. And so it's just a super convenient way to jump into that meeting. So instead of, jumping into the go-to, I had to find the email and click on the button, which opened a web page and then asked me to open the application. Didn't have to do any of that for Teams. I just clicked join and popped me right into the meeting.
Yeah, and I'll look at it this way: two people. Let's say you're having a 3-person meeting. 2 people jump into a meeting 5 minutes early. Third person doesn't know that they're in there. That's 5 minutes wasted of 2 employees, right? That are just sitting there waiting for the third person to join. If the third person can join 5 minutes early, they do, right? And then you're taking advantage of that 5 minutes. It's not only convenient, it can be a little bit of a time saver.
So here's, my Teams, where is it going? What is all this? Since its rollout, there have been almost 100 new features added to Teams. One that I know is in development that's coming is, they're called pop-out windows. So the nice thing about Teams is everything's in one location, but the bad thing is when you're trying to do 2 things at once, like chat and work on a file.
Or like demoing Teams within the Teams.
So that's a feature that's coming down the road. It's in the development bucket right now, but it'll be rolling out soon. And then we talked about some of the third-party options. So when I pulled this information a week ago, the number was 331. When I checked yesterday, it had already jumped up to 341. So the ability to tie into other information is just incredible.
Even the little read receipt, read receipt eyeball that you had shown earlier, I believe rolled out last month, right? So
yeah.
it just kind of came out, and there it's part of your Teams. So it's something that from an adoption perspective, you'll want to be you'll want to be aware of what's coming down the road, and look for, but the major gaps, if you will, with regards to functionality are all filled. At this point, they are starting to go after, deeper integrations and things of that nature. From a voice perspective, I obviously a lot of people tie credence into Gartner's area. And so from a voice and conferencing perspective or unified communications, you'll see that Microsoft is in a really high delivery and an upper right quadrant area. So for those that take stock in Gartner, I thought we'd at least put that up there. Again, we're going to have a deeper dive on voice and conferencing in a future webinar. From a governance perspective, there's we have 2 slides, I think, on governance. Again, we are going to have a whole webinar focused on governance because there are 50 plus dials and so forth that you're going to want to consider and or turn with regards to this. But to the points that people have brought up before, this leverages all the Office 365 governance that you might already be accustomed to. If you have an e-discovery plan that you're executing relative to your email today, you can simply extend that e-discovery to encompass Teams information also. Similar with data loss prevention, right? If you're looking at emails going in and out the door, you may want to look at, hey, I don't want that sort of information shared. Now, DLP is really cool. Within Teams in a chat, if someone was to post, let's say, some customer information in a Teams chat, you might not want that information to be part of that chat. And therefore, DLP is going to, in real time, essentially take that post that that person put in there and strip it out. And you can watch it real time. Great to demo. We'll do so in the future when we're in our governance area. Mobile application management. Who's allowed to access Teams from where? Are they allowed to take that data with them on their mobile device? What can that data also be put into a non-authorized application like Box or Dropbox? Mobile application management that you might be accustomed to definitely applies to Teams, as well as multi-factor authentication. The single, probably most important thing we can think about is making sure that the people who are authenticating against your site are the people that you think they are. And one way to do that is simply using Office 365 multi-factor authentication. Again, we'll talk more about that. And there's a number of items, and I think on the next slide, certainly Teams as a whole, as an application that resides out on desktops, there's a fair amount of settings you could have, group policies or otherwise, but who's going to create teams? Who's allowed to create teams? If you let everyone create teams, maybe there'll be team sprawl. How long should those sites be available? When should they expire? Should this data be synchronized down to non-domain joined machines? What should our naming convention be? Guest access sounds like a big thing. Is it a big thing? Which teams allow guest access? Who's allowed to authorize that? Who gets notified when guest access is provided? Third-party applications that Tim mentioned before. In any case, I'm not going to keep going into all the bells and whistles. We will have a future webinar on this. It's obviously a large topic. I don't want it to be a hindrance to you deploying it, but I want you to know that there are considerations that should be given, and we put a couple top ones here on the screen. It's
so where
things
is
you
this
need
all
to think. Yeah, things you need to think about in the beginning. So
sure. So our Envision is, let's start with the envisioning and readiness piece. Let's look at how to get started. So part of our service, is to connect with companies and walk through some of these concepts, look at use cases, demo the application. What are you using now to collaborate? Whose responsibilities is it? So sit down, have a meeting, go through these topics, and kind of start working on that plan to get you going. So we've kind of broken it down to three areas: the discovery, the design.
And essentially, Microsoft has some guidance in this space. We've aggregated that guidance into our own workbook, and we're essentially walking through it very similar to when we've done Office 365 engagements, right? But this is obviously focused on Teams. The aspects that we need to discover are probably relevant to what aspects of Teams you might want to unfold this for. Are you looking to look at this for a voice replacement and so forth? So a lot of these are kind of intertangled, similar to the design and the readiness. There are three individual areas that we need to do as tasks to kind of make this all come together and make sure that the footing that you're on, as well as the path that you're heading, is something that's risk-free and your eyes wide open.
And in terms of the readiness, there's a lot of integration with Teams, so we need to make sure that your environment is healthy, your Office 365 is secure, that Exchange and SharePoint on the back end are working the way they're supposed to be. If you don't have a synchronization environment right now, that you're going to limit your functionality. It's just some real high level network readiness. If you're just going to be using it for chat, your network requirements are much different than if you're doing full voice and video. So go through this process. We're going to walk you through. We're going to meet and check the boxes and produce a report at the end that really is going to get you ready for that next step. So hopefully you've targeted your deployment around a specific feature. It could be something as simple as we want to replace Skype and we want to use Teams for chat. It could be as complicated as we want to pull out our PBX and put in Teams voice. Or it could be, document sharing. We're using a file share now, but we want to create Teams sites and channels and have our collaboration defined that way. So we'll sit down with you, we'll walk through scenarios, we'll, analyze your needs and come up with some outcomes and use cases, assign, people on your end that are going to be the sponsors, and work with you to get ready for that next step.
So our elements of that are turnkey. Your elements of how you embrace it and maybe what your vision is the not turnkey part, and that's the part we need to talk about.
So you can go to our website, you can, click the Get Started button, put some information in, that'll generate a ticket for us to, do that engagement and follow through and see what you want to do.
You have an account manager already, obviously follow up with them, but know that our go-to-market, if you will, relative to Teams, is to get started around envisioning and readiness. Again, we'll make it as turnkey as possible based on your scenario, but we think that getting started on the right footing is important, and covering off on what's possible under governance and so forth is a phase, right? And certainly part of your readiness.
So upcoming, we talked about, we originally had thought about doing this 3 days in a row, then we realized that probably wasn't going to work out. So we're kind of through a high level, a little bit of everything today. We know there's some areas we want to touch on, specifically governance and then the voice conferencing, and then use cases or other things that you're interested in. We're definitely going to have another webinar March 12th. And that brings us to our third poll. What do you want to see next?
Yeah, we intend to do them all. I guess tell us what you'd rather see in March, and if there's something else, we're open to that also. Know that Teams is a large
entity.
Entity, yeah, exactly. And there's a lot that can be done, but we want to make sure that you're getting the collaboration needs addressed. We want you to deploy it, right? And we want to help you where possible. And these are designed to be educational and to kind of tell you some of the things that open some eyes, I guess, in some areas. But engage with us also on any of these areas, and we'll do so on a one-to-one basis as opposed to one-to-many here. All right, based on timing, certainly appreciate everyone joining. Hopefully it looks like our next webinar on March 12th is going to be either around use cases. Appreciate everyone's input. We'll certainly bring our use cases and kind of have them in an organized fashion, demo them, and look forward to your attendance.